rather than speak faster, I'll just say less, I suppose. So we're going to do some perspectives on international paving practices now, to give you a perspective on the fact that what you do is not unique. We're building concrete pavements all around the world. And there's a lot we can learn from each other by doing this. So my primary references for this presentation, I went directly to the source of the people that sell the equipment because they take a lot of good pictures for publicity. So we have Wirken out of Germany, Gameko out of Iowa in the United States, and Gunterton Zimmerman out of California in the United States. I've also pulled a fair amount from the internet. And I actually stole some photos from Astrid and other friends that I've made along the way that I didn't reference like Mauricio did, so I feel bad for that. I'll point that one out, though, since she's in the crowd. Again, we saw this photo earlier. In the US, we have a very large roadway network, and every year, we pave on average about 50 million square meters of concrete pavement for roads. That's not everything. That's not, again, industrial and airfields and the other spots, other spaces. That's roads. We're paving that much. Our biggest competitor, if you would call them that, with regards to roadway paving, is probably China. In the matter of 4 years, they added 640,000 lane kilometers of capacity to the roadways. And because they do so much manufacturing, they're moving a lot of raw material, they're building things, and then they're exporting the things that they built to the US and Chile and everyone else around the world. They have very high truck traffic loads. In the US, our legal limit on trucks is relatively low compared to the rest of the world. In fact, most of our trucks, unless you're moving something very, very lightweight, most of our trucks drive around half empty. We say they scale out before they cube out. So they run out of weight capacity before they fill their volume. In China, that's not the case. They fill the volume to move product. So they have very heavy traffic loads. Because of that, about 70% of their paved roadways are concrete to fight against that, to make serviceable pavements. So who's building concrete pavements around the world? This is the list of countries that I've worked with or am aware of that build concrete pavements in my decade within the industry. All of those top 10 that we saw are on this list. If you know of any countries that are building or have built that aren't on this list, let me know. I'd like to get them added. But all around the world, people are building concrete pavements. Some facts. First concrete pavement in the world was built in Scotland in 1865. That section failed very quickly in a matter of a couple years. But some of the sections that they built in 1872, about 150 years ago, or no, 125 years ago, sorry, are still in service. They're still there today. The first section of concrete pavement built in the Western Hemisphere was built in Ohio. It's right here. It's still in service today. Built in 1891. It doesn't look great. It's had better days, but Ohio's a very high freeze-thaw state. They use a lot of salt on the roadways. There was no structural design in those days. Even into the 70s, we were still kind of guessing about things. So in 1891, what they did was said, we have lumber that is this tall. We will make a square out of that. And the square's dimensions, the size of the slabs, was based just on mixer capacity. How much concrete can we make at once? Let's make it that big. That's it. No dowel bars, no tie bars, no logic about anything. Just building concrete squares. The gentleman in that photo, the statue of him, George Bartholomew, had to put a 5-year warranty on that pavement. It's still in service over 100 years later. Is there a product in the world that's been warrantied for 5 years and lasted that long? Can't imagine any other product. So in the USA, as I've said, we build these a lot under heavy traffic, on very steep grades. That's in San Francisco. We do this thin bonded overlay in the bottom left corner. Do a lot of concrete pavement construction. So now we'll see photos from other countries. And just to try to be brief, I won't dwell too much on them, other than to point out, I guess, more differences. Like here, they're using a loader to move the concrete in front of the paver. We would never see that in the US. I'm not sure what sort of limitation has them doing that, but they're doing that. They have dowel bars, as we use in the US. They also use continuously reinforced concrete pavements. In China, they're doing some fixed form paving without dowel bars. It's a double or triple tube screed. They're in-dumping right out of the back of trucks, right in front of the equipment, moving it around, leveling it off. Photo from Kenya. They have dowel baskets out there in front of this fixed form paving. They're using a truss screed, broom texture on the surface. You see that all around the world, and their hand spraying on the curing compound. They don't have a white pigmented curing compound, but they're still using a curing compound. South Africa. This is looking a little sloppy for what I'd like to see, but same idea. They're using almost the same piece of equipment that they had in China, and they're building very long stretches of concrete pavements in South Africa. Looks like they're also using a broom texture. Here's one project that they had, and I was told that this was in an eco-sensitive area. And the supports for these bridges had to be constructed completely from above, with all equipment and material brought in by helicopter. Very expensive. So the roadway was not that much of a lift for them to build in concrete, I suppose, even if the prices would have been more than asphalt. This is a large investment in the bridges there. So this is up in the mountains, but they're doing the same thing. Fixed form, single tube, even up those slopes. They've got a truss screed following that, a burlap drag, finishing, texturing, and curing. Similar to what you saw Mauricio show earlier, they have tents, especially when they're up in the mountains and the weather can change like that. And they have the sides they can roll down, but they're protecting that from the environment during the curing time. Some more photos from that one project in South Africa in the mountains. They do have a great document. Now, in the US, with so much of the focus being on slip form paving, we don't have the best documentation of fixed form operations. I will admit that. This document from South Africa is an exceptional guide to the topic of fixed form paving, because that is their standard. They do slip form paving, but it seems like they have to have a contractor have a large enough project to purchase the slip form paver to bring it in, and then they sell it off afterwards. But fixed form paving all day, that's what they do. There's a guide similar to that out of Mexico, that IMSIC, which is the Mexican equivalent of ICH, has developed, which is very heavy on fixed form operations as well, if you're looking for more guidance. Saudi Arabia, large production slip forming projects. At nighttime, during the day, we see the tie bar sticking out of the side. They have an auto float here. I guess we haven't seen that in other photos. That's another add-on piece behind the slip form paver that does the work of the person who otherwise would be using the straight edge. It just glides back and forth across the surface to help close the surface off more. Germany, the home of Wirken. It's like you get to look at Germany for a second while I figure out why it is we've stopped advancing again. What we see in the top photo here is some stringless operations. This is the rover. Hopefully we have time to get to that in innovations. He can measure the elevation of the subgrade, step that up on top of the slab, and measure the exact thickness of the slab in that spot, all using lasers. These are the masts supporting some prisms, which all of that machine is being guided just by lasers. Some photos from India. They do a lot of roadways. That's a pretty wide span there. You wouldn't do that with fixed form paving probably, but slip form pavers can pave that way. Indonesia, this is one that I wanted to get to. Because the price of labor is so low there, they could justify precast slabs on a massive scale. In the US, we reserve this for toll plazas and overnight closures in New York City and Chicago and Los Angeles, places that time is really money, and that the DOT or the owner does not want to let any of the time be lost, so things are very quick. So for us, it's very costly because it's a small scale, high unit price. In Indonesia, they built a massive farm almost where they precast all the slabs and built up a stockyard, but they did all the curing and texturing and everything in a controlled environment, transported these slabs out into the field, and built an entire new roadway on new alignment. I believe that was directly on the subgrade. And this was precast, post-tensioned. And it was something like 50 kilometers long or something in this one instance. So it can be cost justified. Some photos from Bolivia. Here, this type of curing with a plastic sheet and rocks to weigh it down to keep it from blowing away, we would never use that in the US. We would just call that too costly. If anybody has any comments on anything, do speak up. Mexico, examples of fixed form paving in the city. I believe this photo is from maybe it's the one on the bottom right. One of those two is from the reconstruction of their ring road. They did that in the last 3 or 4 years. A massive project for them. And they did that in concrete, the loop road around the city. Canada. Quick video from Canada. Practices aren't that much different than the US, but we have our auger spinning up front, moving the concrete back and forth. It's not the quickest process, but it's pushing it into the corners. They have its tie bar inserter, the rocket launcher on there as well. In this particular instance, they had some space limitations as well, which required them to install the dowel bars during construction. Oh, you get to see the auto float in action. So that's what I described earlier. Instead of that one person walking with the straight edge, this device goes back and forth and adds just a little bit more smoothness. So they have to deliver directly in front for some reason. So on the fly, the contractors are picking up the dowel baskets and affixing them to the support. These days, we'd prefer to see that be done with some of the tapered plate dowels because they allow for some misalignment without locking the joints. There we have our wand following the string line for elevation. Sorry, that one's for elevation. Something to note on that. If the support system isn't great, which if you have as high of a CBR as you have, what happens is the track lines that are supporting the slip-form paving operation will start to settle into the support. And there's a lag between that happening and the machine correcting for it. There's a hydraulic lag. So having strong, smooth support is very, very important for the curing, or for the smoothness. Here's a texture cure machine, TC360. So that will apply. Looks like they were set up for longitudinal tine. Nope, they're doing transverse. So the transverse tine will stop, drop that, drag it across the surface, pick it up, move forward, and then go the opposite direction. And the same piece of equipment will also spray on a curing compound. So this video is really the whole process. Well-controlled, uniform process. Paving doesn't stop. That's what we're looking for. Some more heavy equipment in Qatar. Russia. It's all the same. It's white, gold, Gunter de Zimmermann, yellow, which is Gameco, or the beigeish color, Wirken. But those are the three primary manufacturers, and you see the equipment everywhere you go. In the Philippines, there they've got a little bit smaller piece of equipment. They use whatever they had available. Here's a photo from Astrid down in Patagonia. I don't know where this photo is. It's another Chilean photo, though. Any idea where that is, Mauricio? With the fixed form paving? But it looks like they've got some equipment riding on the forms. This one? Yeah. What about this one? Los Andes. To Argentina. Now I know. I've been using that photo for years, and I have no idea where it's from. That's your road. Now I know the man who built the road, too. Another Roberto. Australia. Here they're placing joints. I mentioned that earlier. We did that project in New Mexico where we advised that they have a longitudinal joint in the middle of the lane, and the slab width is basically from middle lane to middle lane. Come to find out, Australia's been doing that for decades. It wasn't until I proposed writing a conference paper about it and had a discussion with a colleague on the topic that he said, "That's nothing new, Robert. We've been doing that." Okay, send me some photos and we'll write the paper together. So sometimes you find out your innovations aren't so innovative. Busways in Scotland, there they've got an inverted pitch. So that's a bus-only lane separate from traffic. That's also going to help with some of the drainage challenges in that local area. Uruguay, Spain, here they're paving into a tunnel. The UAE, Brazil, Poland, the list goes on and on and on. But it's all the same process. We're getting fresh concrete, placing it out in the field somehow, leveling it off, applying a texture, curing it, and saw cutting it. Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Vietnam. In Turkey, things seem to be catching on there very quickly. I think they're doing a fair amount of roller compacted concrete now. Czech Republic, we had a conference there this past year where we had the opportunity to go out on some of the projects that were being built in that photo. Kazakhstan. It all starts to look the same after a while because it's the same process from place to place. And there's only so many manufacturers of equipment. And we do have a pretty well-developed and honed-in method of construction at this point, such that there's not, the innovation at current is happening more in the materials, especially for corrosion resistance and geometry for dowel bars, the cements and the concretes, and not so much in the construction methods. Construction methods you're getting high volume without surprises, right? That's what you want as a contractor.